Hi everyone, I'm Lubomira and thank you for joining me. If you're visiting for the first time, welcome to my channel, and if you are returning, it's great to have you back. Here on my channel, I show you how I combine various card making techniques with elements made with the Cricut. I am super excited by today's video. It was inspired by a technique Jennifer McGuire featured some time ago using laminating pouches. If you haven't had the pleasure, I definitely recommend that video, and I'll of course link it in the description below. My technique is slightly different though. It adds ink to the laminating pouches in addition to the confetti and glitter. But first, let's get into the Cricut tutorial. One of the reasons I got my Cricut was to eliminate my need for so many metal dies. Because of the ability to cut virtually any shape, I've been able to scale down on my collection. Now, that doesn't mean I've completely gotten rid of or stopped getting metal dies. Oh, no. That would be too good for my husband. I still have some, like my decorative stitch dies, some border dies, and word dies that I just love the font. So today, we're going to keep it very simple. I just want to add a nice scripty element to this card. We'll be working on the word believe. First thing we're going to do is enter text and write out the word believe. I know the font I'm using is in my system and it's called Girly Night. I purchased it from a site called fontbundles.net. I'll talk about this site a little bit more in the future, but it's a great site for fonts and graphics, especially if you need commercial licenses. I'm going to move that up and zoom in a little bit. One of the things I do when I work with dainty fonts is I bold them. I used to be afraid that they'd lose some of their delicate look when I bolded them, but it's just so much easier to weed them off a mat when they have a little bit more meat to them. I also make sure that I use a heavier cardstock and a sharp knife in my machine. After I bold them, I just want to incorporate some special characters, but they don't appear automatically in the Cricut Design Space program. So I'm going to have to paste them in onto my grid directly from another program. I use good old-fashioned Word for this. I open Word and go to Insert tab on the top. Once that opens, I scroll to the right where it says Symbols, and I click on the drop menu. Then I click More Symbols, and now a window opens with all kinds of characters. Make sure to select the font you want. In this case, it's Girly Night. Now I just have to scroll down and look for the characters I want. I'm going to be switching out my B and the E at the end of the word. Okay, so here they are. I insert the letters into my document, close that window, and then individually select one letter, copy, and then go back into Design Space. Open the text box, select your letter, in this case the B. Make sure you only select the letter you are replacing and paste it into that place. A little funny square will appear in the text box, but on the grid you'll get your special character. And we're going to do the exact same thing for the E. Okay, so we now have the letters we want. Now we are going to take care of the spacing. You may have noticed that I don't really use the spacing tool. I prefer to line up my characters, my letters manually. First, I'm going to ungroup them. That way I can move them individually. You can use your mouse to do this. I prefer using my keyboard. That way the letters stay on the same line that they were originally fit to. I just move them using my right and left arrow key. If my letters are too close doing that, I'll play around with the positioning tool and change the x-axis, and I literally just change the positioning by hairs because I'm changing the 10th or the 100th place. Once I'm satisfied, I select all the letters and weld them, and that's it. Easy peasy. Now for the fun part. I love using alcohol inks because there is no wrong way of doing this. Just make sure when you are working with these inks, you're working in a well-ventilated area or with open windows. First thing I do is open my laminating pouch so it's laying open like a book. From there, I just start having fun and dropping in ink. No special skills whatsoever. I'm using Tim Holtz alcohol inks and blending solution. I use the colors Pool, Indigo, Eggplant, Raspberry, and a little bit of the metallic silver. There is, again, no special skills. All I do is I drop the colors in one by one and I let them blend. To get them moving, I either blow on the ink or add some alcohol solution. I even tried tilting the project, but that creates more of a runny look, which is also very pretty. But I wanted more of a cloudy, organic kind of moving shape. I did avoid the edges of my pouch to prevent a mess. And another great thing about this particular project is the pouches are fairly large, so you can definitely get several panels out of one pouch. After you apply the ink, set it aside to dry. I didn't move mine from where I was working because I didn't want the colors to run. But if you are going to be moving your project, make sure you have a sturdy panel or palette that you can actually pick it up so that the colors don't move on you. Now, the secret to this technique is making sure the ink is completely dry before you laminate it. Otherwise, you're going to have a mess and possibly break your laminator. If the ink is not dry, it will be pressed out from between your laminating sheet, and the ink will get all over the inside of your laminator. So you want to avoid that. I'm going to add here that I have a cheap Scotch laminator. I've had it for years, and I specifically use it for these kinds of experiments. I did not use my fancy laminator for this, just in case. Having said that, though, everything worked out well and the panels came out beautifully, but you do have to make sure that the ink is completely dry. Before I go in and I place my pouch into the laminator, I did go back and I sprinkled some confetti, some stars and hexagons, and some very fine glitter. You want to make sure that whatever you want to use in your laminator, it is flat and not too bulky. Otherwise, it gets a very strange look, almost like air bubbles. After the panel is laminated, it has so much sparkle and it looks just magical. I can see this technique being used for underwater scenes or galaxies and sky. It's just so pretty. I love how the light passes through it and you have all those colors. After that is done, it's time to start assembling my card elements. I want a see-through panel in the front of my card, so I need to cut it into my card base to accommodate it. I do that by measuring an inch below the crease where my card base folds, and I cut straight across. I'm left over with the bottom panel. And again, I'm just going to need a portion of it, so I cut it down to an inch again. That leftover separate piece, I line up with the bottom of my back panel and hold it into place with washi tape. Now, when I look at my card base, I'm looking at a card that's missing a section right down the middle of it. Now it's time to put my laminated section into place. I have a lot of panel to choose from, so I take a minute just to plan where I want to cut it from. Once I do that, using my trimmer, I slice a piece about 3 inches tall by 5.5 inches wide. And don't worry, I'm definitely saving the rest of my panel for another project. Next, using strong double-sided tape, I put it along the bottom of that little flap and the top of my separate bottom piece. With the tape in place, I can press my laminated panel down. Now I have a completed card base to build on. With my laminate panel in place, I can work on the top portion of my card. I wanted to create a little texture in my skyline. To do that, I added some clouds made of vellum and solid cardstock. First, I measured and marked 1 inch across my scrap pieces of vellum and white cardstock. I do that because I want to cover the top flap of my card where I adhered the laminated panel to the base. The markings just indicate where I can place my cloud die. Since I want the vellum to be peeking out from underneath my solid cardstock, I need to lay my cloud die much lower on the vellum, while higher on my solid piece. The see-through quality of the vellum lets me position the dies easily. Once I have my placement, I can attach my dies using some washi tape and run them through my die cut machine off camera. After everything is cut, I simply glue the pieces into place using some tape runner, the vellum being the first layer and the solid clouds on top. There was a slight overhang of vellum, so I snipped that off using some scissors. Next, I moved on to the bottom section of my card, and like the top, I covered the part where the laminated panel and the card base met using another die. This time I used the Forest Border die by Lawn Fawn. And like the top, I just made a note of where I needed to cut so that the die covered the seams. Now, I don't show this in the video, but I actually used some spray adhesive to put the lower piece into place. And I did this because it was easier to make sure all those intricate trees got coated with glue. I could have used liquid glue as well though. I worked on my sentiment next, and I took several of small words from the Winter Sky stamp set, also by Lawn Fawn, and pieced them together to create the phrase, "Wishing you a magical Christmas." I used my Mini Misty to arrange the letters, using the grid on the front panel to make sure that my words were straight. I took a piece of basil cardstock in the color Polypoo and heat embossed the sentiment using Versamark ink and silver embossing powder from Ranger. It's always so satisfying to watch embossing powder melt. Having my sentiment banner, I worked on my decorative word die next, the one that we made with the Cricut. I had my Cricut cut out 3 layers of white cardstock and 1 silver glitter layer. I went ahead and glued the 3 white layers on top of each other and then the silver. I'm not going to lie, sometimes the more intricate fonts can be a little tricky to align, but it is doable. The trick is not to get your hands too sticky in the process and to use tweezers to get into those hard to reach spots. At that point, I wasn't sure what to do next, so you see me just looking at how the banner would fit with the Believe. I decided to add a little critter and at the same time draw attention to the sky. The winter sky stamp set again was perfect for this. Off camera, I stamped my little flying Santa and the little polar bear in Simon Says black ink. I placed the Santa in the sky using foam squares, and then I simply colored the polar bear using Copics and added stripes to his scarf using a white gel pen before I placed him next to the banner. For details on the colors I used, please check the description below. And that's that for this card. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed yourself, remember to like my video, and if you'd like to see more videos, please subscribe to my channel. I'll see you next time. Bye!